Brilliant. So, welcome to today's session, Islamophobia, Causes and Cures. I guess the best place to start off with, and to kind of just make sure that everyone's kind of engaged right from the off, is to really begin with thinking about what Islamophobia actually is. And the reason why we kind of start off here is because we can't really have conversations about anything until we kind of understand what we're talking about first, especially when it comes to terms like this Islamophobia, which have become so perhaps loaded and thrown about in the media and in society. And it's important that we kind of start off on understanding definitions. And even when you kind of start projects and things like this, you always start off with like a terms of reference so that you kind of move along in the process, all knowing exactly what you're talking about. And it's no different with this. With Islamophobia, but what definition are we actually talking about here? And it's this particular definition here, which actually comes on the back of perhaps about a year's consultation that was led by the All-Party Parliamentary Group on British Muslims, which is a cross-party panel in Parliament of Conservatives, Labour, all types of different members of Parliament who discuss issues affecting the Muslim community or British Muslims, and they took it upon themselves to deal with this issue of Islamophobia, but they said we can't deal with it without actually defining it. And so they did a whole year's consultation where they brought in people from think tanks and people with lived experiences and everyone kind of feeding into this consultation. And they came up with this particular definition here, which needs a bit of breakdown, but I think it'll draw us closer to what it is that we're actually trying to deal with. And some of you already kind of dealt with some of these points in your responses, so thanks for that. But the term here, Islamophobia, is going with this particular definition, that it is rooted in racism, and it's a type of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. If you're kind of if you consume the news like I do, and you're always kind of hearing some of these discussions, that there's perhaps a bit of discussion about this particular definition. Before we kind of break it down, like I said, there is some conversation regarding this particular definition. As a definition, it's actually been adopted by the Labour Party, by a number of unions, a number of political parties. The Conservative Party of Scotland accepted this definition, but not the England and Wales one. A number of councils have adopted it, universities, unions, and many organisations are adopting this particular definition. But why is it that we're kind of resting on this particular definition? And why is it, I guess, helpful when we're talking about this particular form of discrimination? It says here that Islamophobia is rooted in racism. And some people actually stop there and say, hang on a minute, like, that doesn't make sense because Islam isn't a race. So why are you rooting it in racism? Well, first and foremost, we're not defining Islam. Islam obviously isn't a race, and it's not bound to a geographical location, and Muslims come in all colours and from all over the world. But this particular discrimination is something that's rooted in racism, because like racism, when someone is discriminatory or wants to carry out their racism, before they do that, first and foremost, they look at the person, their victim effectively, and they look for markers. What distinguishes you differently to me? The color of your skin, the way you talk, the texture of your head, the clothes you wear, they look for markers. And so Islamophobia and this particular form of discrimination is rooted in that same kind of psychology. It's rooted in racism that targets expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. And so what the Islamophobe is effectively doing is looking for things that will mark someone out as being or Muslim, as they perceive to be Muslim, or so expression of Muslim or perceived Muslimness. So they will look for markers like the hijab, the headscarf, the niqab, a man with a beard, someone coming out of a building with a dome on it, someone reciting Arabic or speaking Arabic, or whatever it is that they perceive to be connected with the Islamic faith, with the Muslim cultures and norms, before they enact this particular form of discrimination. And as you can see, they also says targets perceived Muslimness, because the reality is, we also know from just Home Office data and police records and reports that people who actually aren't Muslim actually suffer from Islamophobia. There was a case in Wales, one of the shops in Wales, where a man attacked a Sikh man, saying he was doing it for Leah Rigby, attacked a Sikh man with a turban, obviously Asian, with a beard, and he just saw these markers, based on what he saw from the press, like Arabs wear turbans, or Muslims like beards, or something like that. And he just put two and two together. He said, this guy's a Muslim, and he attacked this Sikh man. When the attack was reported, when it was put to the police, they logged it as an Islamophobic incident, because the victim was telling them, the guy only attacked me because he thought I was Muslim, right? And so Islamophobia, this phenomenon that we're talking about, this particular form of discrimination, is about targeting Muslims, or targeting Muslims, or expressions of Muslimness that really comes about as a result of people's perceived ideas of what Islam and Muslims are. This is not just to kind of say this is, and I don't want to limit this just to kind of some kind of academic conversation, because it's definitely not that people kind of perceive Islamophobia to be. So we've got this particular analogy where, when someone kind of expresses what they believe Islamophobia to be, they kind of mention the stuff that people can see, that is visible. It's the verbal attacks, the physical attacks, the attacks on mosques, those kind of things. But in reality, the thing that really captures Islamophobia is the whole iceberg. So when you look at how Islamophobia actually manifests, the things underneath are the things that people don't see, but in fact prop up the whole thing. The discrimination that Muslims feel, the stereotyping that happens, the marginalization, all these things actually create the mood music and the not the legitimacy, but for want of a better phrase, for the things at the top to happen. So if the groundwork is done, if the social media narrative is there, if the media narrative is there, if it's the scapegoating is always happening and it's always there, then you know what? If I just take it one step further, they're already kind of getting vilified, they're already getting marginalized. It's just an additional thing. So these things actually pop up, and it's important that we kind of see this whole gambit as being Islamophobia. And so you'll find that Islamophobia covers things that are seen, that are physical, tip of the iceberg, but the things that aren't. And you'll be hard pressed to kind of find a Muslim or hear someone who knows a Muslim who kind of knows, listen, I've been dealt with differently here for no other reason other than I'm Muslim. I can't touch it, I can't point to it, but you just know the feeling. And these things have actually research behind them. I mean, when it comes to showing how bad Islamophobia is, I mean, we've got Childline showcasing a report a few years back about how even within playgrounds, there's 69% increase in racist bullying, where children at the school playground were calling Muslim kids bomber, terrorists, this kind of language. And it's really something to kind of just to pause on the fact that children at schools are saying this on the playgrounds, because like I've got a 10-year-old, I've got a 6-year-old, and sometimes they come back from the school playground from school and they're saying things I know for sure they did not learn in my house, but other kids are saying stuff, right, and they're picking things up from other kids. And so you're thinking, where did these children pick it up from? And obviously this kind of creates this normalization of language like this. There's stuff that you can't see even in the workspaces, which I'm really it's really kind of profound. This is a study that was reported on by the BBC, where some researchers said, let's see how discriminatory this thing goes. And so what they did in this particular research and study was that they took two CVs exactly the same, pretty much like the same qualifications, same experiences, same age, same hobbies. Like there was nothing to distinguish these two CVs other than one had a Muslim sounding name and one didn't. And so they applied to exactly the same jobs. And the end of the research, the conclusion was that if you had a Muslim sounding name, because that was the only marker that was different between these two things, you're 3 times less likely to get a job interview, which really kind of speaks to some of that stuff which is beneath the iceberg that you can't see, that you can't touch. You've applied and you're thinking, there's a better candidate, and it may have been the case, but this is actual research that showed that the Muslim name itself hinders people from progressing, which is now in a lot of professions there's been a push for like blind application and things like this, so that people are accepted on merit. I've got the story of this a close friend of mine actually, who if you were to see him, you'd think he was a European man. He's white, ginger haired, but he's actually Egyptian, all right? And he's got a very Arab-sounding name. And I once met him at the airport. We were just waiting in the departure gate, and we was having a chat. And then someone from the airline calls his name. He must have had a priority pass or something. Or he called a name out, but it wasn't his name. But he gets up and and it was like an English name, effectively. And I said, "What are you getting up for?" He goes, "Oh, I changed my name." I said, "You what?" Because I changed my name. What did you change your name for? He said, "Listen, I travel at least 10 times a year. You know, when I'm seen from far, no one has a clue that I'm Arab or Muslim or anything. But when I come to them and I give them my passport and they see my first name, my second name is just Arab name, Ibn Arab name, I'm just put." I was like, "Excuse me, sir, can you come to the side?" He goes, "You know what? I just changed my name by default." And now he has a very English name. And he goes, they see my passport, they pass me along, I don't get any grief. I was blown away. I was like, he's like, it is what it is. So, there's real life implications to people and their experiences. But this isn't just academic. These are the stats that came out from the Home Office themselves over a number of years. I'm just going to show you quickly. So this is 2020, 2021. These were the hate crime stats reported by the police, by the Home Office themselves, just the reported cases. And God knows, in my line of work over the past 3 years or so that I've been working here, so many instances go unreported. But just the reported cases of religiously motivated hate crime clearly kind of shows from Home Office stats where the biggest victims of religiously motivated hate crimes are. You've got anti-Semitism, which takes almost like a quarter, but the Islamophobia effectively is the highest chunk there. And this is 2020, 2021, where, remember, the world was in lockdown, right? It was COVID. Everyone's at home. I was at home. I'm sure you were at home. I'm sure we couldn't go anywhere. But so where are these numbers coming from? Where are these instances coming from where you've got 2,700 reported cases of Islamophobia in that particular year? When, I don't know when it was. Like, I remember was it August, Help Out to Eat Out or something. But in any case, people were locked up. So where were these numbers coming from? The year after, 21, 22, again, it's the same kind of portion of the pie. So it's always around the 40% mark. The year after, 22, 23, again, it was 2 in 5 victims of all religiously motivated hate crimes are Muslim. In this past year, obviously, with everything that's happening in Gaza, there was a massive spike, obviously, in anti-Semitism, which is, I don't know why the figures aren't come out, but so it's almost like a split. But the figures are, it's still about 40% of the it's about 38 or 39% of were victims, Muslim victims of Islamophobia. So you've got this constant, statistic here that's showing that Islamophobia and anti-Muslim hate is really the most worrying and the highest reported religiously motivated hate crime in the country. But again, these aren't statistics. There are stories behind this, like the example of Zainab Hussein in Leicester, who this is the lady in the blue headscarf. You can't see her face. She's speaking to a reporter there. She was taking her daughter to school one day in Leicester when a guy called Paul Moore got into his car that morning with the sole intention of killing a Muslim. What I'm saying is actually stuff that he's confessed to in court. He gets into his car, drives around in an area where there's a lot of Muslim community in Leicester, and he notices a visible Muslim woman with her 2 daughters, and he drives straight over her. He drives off, goes to attack another group of girls who thankfully he missed. He turns his car back around, drives over Zainab Hussein again, wanting to finish her off. He then goes to his brother's house where he says, I killed a P word for Lee Rigby. Yeah. No, I killed one for England. That's what he said. I killed a Muslim for England. In any case, his brother then calls the police saying, listen, I think my brother's done something really bad. And so the police managed to kind of arrest this guy straight away. Zainab Hussein and her family told by the police basically that this is just, it's a hit and run. It's an unfortunate, it's a violent incident, but it's a hit and run, and there's nothing we can do. Her husband reaches out to MEND saying, listen, this guy came for my wife twice. This is a mess. For 5 days, the police just kept saying, listen, it was just hit and run. And basically a week after a lot of pressure, the police basically said, you know what, it is a hate crime. We are considering this a hate crime. When they knew straight away from day one, when the moment his own brother, who confessed in court and witnessed in court against his own brother, reported the incident straight away. And so you had this, the husband, obviously in that court that you see on the scene, kind of thanked MEND for their support in lobbying for his particular case. These are real life instances. You've got the case of Mohammed Salim, who was leaving a mosque here in Birmingham, where I am, after evening prayers. And this Pavel Lapshin, who flew in from Ukraine to effectively killed Muslims. That's all he came for. In fact, he left 3 bombs at 3 mosques in the Midlands, in Tipton, in Walsall, in Wolverhampton. And he'd left the bombs to detonate after the Friday prayers. At the time of the Friday prayers, which is the congregational, the weekly congregation of Muslims across the week. He went to Green Lane Mosque, which is not far from where I am right now, and he saw a visibly Muslim man, brown man, just like a Muslim, and he stabbed him to death. This is Muhammad Salim. Those bombs that he left, by an incredible turn of fate and decree, it was the week when the times had actually shifted, so there was a change in an hour. So instead of 1:30 being the time for congregational prayer, it was an hour before at 12:30. So thankfully, no one and it got caught in any case, and so they were caught. So no one was hurt, and they were controlled in terms of their destination. These are instances that are happening here and around us. You've got the Finsbury Park incident, where Darren Osborne, he took hired a van from Wales, drove all the way to London, to North London, Finsbury Park area, and it happened to be in the summer. It happened to be a few years back when the Ramadan was still in the summertime, and so people were leaving the mosque about 11 o'clock after the evening night prayer, the night prayers, and so he's driving around Seven Sisters Road, and people are coming out of Muslim Welfare House Mosque, and he just drives straight into the crowd, severely injuring many and killing Makram Ali. These are instances that are living long in the memory, but more so perhaps than any was this massive incident, obviously in Christchurch. Obviously, it's not in the UK, but in kind of the Western world, this kind of really was a profound moment on the 15th of March, 2019, when Brendan Tarrant walked to 2 mosques, live streamed the massacre of 51 Muslims, from 3-year-old Mu'adh Ibrahim to the elderly like Haji Dawood Nabi, and live streamed their massacre. And he left behind the 74-page manifesto, completely intentional about what he was doing and why he was doing it, and ratcheting up this whole narrative of being inspired by this whole narrative about wanting to attack Muslims and the white genocide and the assault on European people, that kind of right-wing rhetoric, which really inflamed and inspired his attack. These are instances. And these slides obviously haven't been updated to include what's happened in the riots just a few months back in the summer, where you had mosques and immigration centres being attacked and absolutely battered, and Muslim homes and businesses being targeted. And there's so much more to kind of say, but this is the reality on the ground. This is why it's an absolute issue that we have to really wake up to the severity of it, and not brush it under the carpet. I've kind of gone on a bit about some of the stats and some of the information about why this is a real issue, but the question comes back to why is it that we're here? And this isn't an exhaustive list or anything like that. We're just going to cover a couple of things just for the sake of time and brevity. But absolutely, you speak to any kind of any Muslim who's who's obviously living what we're living now, and even non-Muslims who are kind of just attuned to kind of what's actually happening, and kind of stepping back from the whole zeitgeist of far right narratives and things like this, and just to see the picture of what's actually happening. I mean, the ease at which you can attack the Muslim community is absolutely ridiculous. The scapegoating, the racialization, or the political point scoring, the dog whistle politics, the foghorn politics. It's clear for anyone who's really kind of got their eyes open. And the media, like I said, actually plays a massive role. And this is one of the major causes of why we are where we are. There was one particular study done about 10 years ago, but it kind of plays to this issue of the bias that's kind of now seeped into a lot of people in society, where the University of Lancaster did this research about 10 years ago, where they said, listen, we've got this issue of the rise in Islamophobia and the anti-Muslim hate and things like this, and what role is the media playing? So they took a cross-section, they took a segment of press, just printed press, that spoke about the Muslim community. And so they took headlines and they took articles and things like this, and they said, what is it that they're saying about the Muslim community or about Islam? What is it that our media is saying? And so the research showed that for every one moderate mention of Islam or Muslims. There were 21 references to Muslims as negative or extreme. Imagine that. So everyone in this call, right? Just I don't know how many we are. It might be 20-ish. Yeah. Like I asked everyone, listen, what's Sarah like? Right? I don't know her. Yeah. And just Maritza says, you know what, she's all right. Yeah. But everyone else says, Sarah, watch out for that one. Yeah. I, as someone who doesn't know her, is thinking, you know what, they can't all be wrong. Why are they all saying these negative things, right? And so you've got this sheer, the ratio is absolutely mad. The sheer volume of negative press that's just being pumped out to say Islam bad, Muslims evil, abuser, extremist, but like that is just pumped and pumped and pumped. And so it then becomes like that then becomes this fertile ground to kind of start to easily profile, to stereotype, to marginalize, to kind of have your wits about you because there's a Muslim with a beard walking into the tube with a truck with a bag on, you know, like automatically that's like the worst kind of like thing that can happen to your day, because we've been fed a particular kind of messaging, and this is really, really damaging and really plays on the psyche, and just kind of goes into this unconscious bias that starts to happen. That, you know, we're all kind of, you know, no one is free of some kind of unconscious bias of one sort or another. But when you've got this type of messaging that comes along, it's absolutely key to bring this up. Just to kind of show you how kind of these things are really impactful. This is the Times, the world's most recognized newspaper, as old as, I don't know. But this is the headline, right? Christian child forced into Muslim foster care. And then you've got this, it's a woman in niqab, completely dark and blacked out, and she's carrying, or she's with her is a pixelated blonde girl, and you've got all this messaging coming out, thinking, oh my God, what is going on here, right? What's going on? And you know, you're reading this and you're thinking, what, you know, how is it that this is happening? No, it's playing on all these kind of different pressure points, as it were, to really drive a particular narrative home. Unmasked, or rather hacked off an organization that came back on the back of the Leveson inquiry and all the phone hacking scandal that happened all those years back, News of the World, etc. They looked into some of this stories by Andrew Norfolk, and in particular this one and a few others, and they found that this is an absolutely made-up story. So there's a Muslim foster family. So here it says, concern for girl who was cross removed and was encouraged to learn Arabic. Yeah. And so you look into the story and it just completely blows up this story that is absolutely a non-story. And so you've got this Muslim foster family that has been fostering for, I think, almost 7 years by that time. And they've had children from all walks of life come into their care and look after them and bring them back. This particular case was about a young girl whose mother was going through some trials and tribulations. And so her grandmother, who was an elderly, she couldn't look after her. So she put her into the social system. And she was paired up with this Muslim foster family, and they looked after her. This young girl came to the family, and she was given by her mother, this troubled mother who was, you know, being looked after. She was given this really big cross, a crucifix, and so the family said to the grandmother, "Listen, we know that this is from her mother, but we don't want it to break or anything like that. You can keep it with her, or you can look after it." And the grandmother said, "Yeah, sure, I'll look after it." Yeah. And this family was teaching children all different types of languages, from Arabic to French to all different types of things. But that doesn't sell. This sells. Yeah, this imaging sells. That headline sells. And it starts to skew with the level of messaging that the press gives to the Muslim community or on the Muslim community is absolutely skewing the perception that people have about the scale of the Muslim community so quickly. And just throw out some numbers here. So this is an Ipsos Mori poll that was done, I think, about 7-8 years ago, so just before the last census. But it gives you an indication of the point I'm trying to kind of drive home. So they asked this question about the proportion of the Muslim community of the UK population they believe was Muslim. So people got to fill in London, 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, 20% or more, right? So they had this range to select from about the Muslim population in particular regions. So these were the perceptions that people had. So when they filled in the survey, they thought Muslims more than 20% of so all these percentages showcased or show the amount of people who thought that Muslims made up more than 20% of these regions. But what's the actual figure at that time? So Muslims in London were actually 12.4% of the whole city, not over 20%. You've got 6.7% of the West Midlands is actually Muslim, not over 20%. The Northwest, 5%, just over 5% of the Northwest is actually Muslim. So obviously we're talking not just the built-up area, we're talking about the whole region. In Wales, the whole country of Wales, 1.5% of Wales is Muslim. I think there's more sheep in Wales than there are Muslim. But there's and Scotland is the same, 1.5%. The question is, how is it that people are thinking the Muslims are making up so many people? It's because of the incredible attention we're given, massively disproportionate to our numbers, because there's a political message, there's a narrative that wants to kind of be pulled out there, because there's this issue of the media narrative that's out there. It's unfortunately it's across Europe, and there's a growth in these kind of far right narratives that is across Europe. And unfortunately, whilst these far right kind of groups politically might be differing on quite a number of things, what they're united on is immigration and Muslims, and that kind of narrative is really there to kind of be seen. But then you've also got, so this is one particular case. Again, there's so much more, but we're just going to quickly just pass through this one. Just refer to it. So you've had this imam being killed, beaten to death in Rochdale. Yeah, that was the correction in the after. So before, the Times put it out that we had the whole the grooming issue in Rochdale, and it gave the assumption, or it inferred, that this imam was beaten to death because he was involved in this grooming, when he was completely free of these kind of that particular matter completely. But this man who was beaten to death now is seen as someone good riddance because he was perhaps part of this grooming gang, when in fact he was beaten to death for having no connection with that particular crime. And so, there has to be this reckoning with the media, constantly checking it, what's being spewed out there. But the sheer volume means that it's just too much, and it's too much to kind of take on just by yourselves. Another issue is lack of legislative protection. So the idea is that society kind of goes through phases where you have problems in society. The society wants to get rid of this particular problem, whether it's racism, whether it's gender discrimination, whatever it is. And so they enact laws to make sure that society is bound within a certain framework and a certain moral code to a degree. And so there was an attempt in 2006 to try to kind of bring some kind of parity with the religious discrimination and racial discrimination, to say that, listen, none of it is good, none of it is allowed, none of it should be tolerated or accepted. And so a particular legislation came out called the Race and Religious Hatred Act of 2006, with the idea of creating some kind of parity between racial abuse and religious abuse and hatred. But in reality, the law itself, it's not fit for, it's not what the ink it's or the paper it's written on. When you look at the actual legislation, if someone is abused, insulted, threatened by virtue of their race, this legislation kicks in, and you've got the perpetrator bang to rights. If, on the other hand, someone insults you, threatens you, abuses you based on your religion, this legislation does not kick in unless you can prove that that same person who did all those things, or one of those things, also wanted to stir up religious hatred, which is a massive bar to reach. And so since 2006, only 6 people have actually been caught by this this particular legislation. And the reality is that, and the reason why they were, is because they were already part of like the EDL or some kind of group who were threatening or stirring up religious hatred. So they had that with them to meet that particular threshold. And in fact, at the time, there was this particular case with Eric Kitson, who was a sitting councillor at the time for UKIP, and he posted this incredibly abusive and insulting post on Twitter. So the sitting elected member of council, a particular council, who said that in Stourport, you've got a pig there with the name of Allah on a chef's hat, and a Muslim being spit roasted with the burning Quran. And in another post, he's talking about Muslim women, hang them all first and ask questions later. And so people rightly said, listen, this isn't on. We've got this new legislation. Let's do this guy. Let's get him bang to rights. And so the CPS looked at the case and they said, you know what, was it abusive? Yeah. Was it insulting? Yes. Could it be threatening? Sure. But did he meet the threshold of wanting to incite religious hatred? No. So sorry, we can't do anything with it. Now, the idea is not to kind of put people down to say that there's no legislation. And you're right, we wanted to kind of bring up the fact that we've got the Equalities Act and we've got things but this is the Equalities Act, and the protected characteristics are usually kind of within organizations and public sector in these kind of places. This is outside of that, in the wider community, as a criminal, as a piece of legislation to couch someone who's committing a particular criminal act, and to couch religious abuse and insult and threatening behavior based on people's religion as something that can be caught under as a form of criminality. But like I said, there's that particular legislation doesn't meet the standards that it came out for. You've got a number of things, and I'm really conscious of time to kind of, and there's more to kind of say about all the things that have created this environment that we're in. But we need to kind of say, how is it that we can kind of actually push back against this? There seems to kind of be this rising tide, this kind of rising level of Islamophobia, this ease at which the Muslim community can easily kind of be attacked. But we can't be despondent. Like, how is it that we can kind of tackle these things? There's no silver bullet. There's no one button you press and everything's kind of hunky dory and it's all fine. We're going to just go through some of these suggested points and you'll see some of these make sense, and holistically, and some of the things that you mentioned obviously all fall into this particular thing. So I appreciate you guys bringing forward these points. First and foremost, it's important that we actually report Islamophobia when it happens. The numbers that we have, I mean, today's day and age, data is king effectively. And when you're trying to lobby, when you're trying to kind of put pressure, when you're trying to kind of do all these kind of things, statistics, like when you know that 40% of all reported hate crime, religiously motivated hate crime are anti-Muslim or Islamophobic, it's a major stat. And you see the consistency over the years. It's like something has to happen. Where is this turning from just being reporting into actual prosecution, into kind of really stepping down? So the reporting is a really key element. Awareness is absolutely vital. I mean, within the Muslim community, they also, you'll shrug your shoulders and say, it is what it is. It's part of the territory of just being a minority community. It is what it is. But no, we have to kind of show that this is something that the society has to really step up and say, listen, we can't allow this to happen. Raising awareness is really key. We have events like the Islamophobia Awareness Month every November, where, a lot of organizations and the NHS and the other trusts kind of get involved in, just to kind of highlight the issue, but also about Muslim contribution and things like this, just to build those relationships, like some of you mentioned. Partnerships are absolutely vital. And it's one thing for us to let the Muslim community know about this issue, but they're like, listen, we're bearing the brunt of this. We need partnerships. We need people to kind of like stand shoulder to shoulder with us. And so these partnerships and alliances and campaigns are really, really key to make sure that people are talking about this very pertinent issue, and engaging the stakeholders. So the stakeholders are people in power. So it will be the politicians. So whilst we want to kind of hold them to account, it's also educating them and lobbying them and making sure they represent the media. While we hold them to account and we report and we get in there and we correct the media, it's also important to do some training with so what we do is we do media roundtables in organizations, especially on a local level, where we get community members and the local press to kind of come in to build relationships. So when a story kicks off, it's not just a case of one, speaking at another, as opposed to speaking with them and building those relationships and those and with the police as well and things like this. What you'll find, and a lot of things that have kind of really seeped through in that last bit, was about education. Education is an interesting one because it's true that a lot of people, because all they've consumed about Islam and Muslims just from the press, then obviously it's going to be negative, and so they will have that bias because it's all they've known. And so the education is really key. But when you look at some of those who are really peddling the Islamophobia, doing the dog whistle politics and really kind of like owning the media to kind of say a particular narrative and have a particular agenda, they're really educated. They actually know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. And so there's a really it's a really interesting kind of point to just to bring forward, that educating the masses about the issue of Islamophobia, but not just from a negative position that, listen, we're victims and some of you said, listen, getting there into schools, getting there into meeting your neighbor, letting them know who you are, letting them know by your actions. This is all key. And the Muslim community is fully aware of that, as well as not because they want to necessarily tackle Islamophobia, but just to kind of showcase what their faith is and how how they contribute into society. So a number of these things obviously fall into how we tackle Islamophobia. If you know someone who is suffering, if you are someone who's suffering, what kind of avenues are there to reach out to? And what we signpost to is the Islamophobia a response unit, which is an independent charity of caseworkers, of lawyers, and they will give you free legal independent advice. If it gets to a disciplinary or something like this, or a tribunal matter, they will provide free lawyers, pro bono lawyers to kind of support you in your matter. If it's a case on the street, at a school, whatever it is, this independent charity is there to support. but also on on an individual level. So we have this training that we can kind of offer maybe further down the line, Sarah, if you're interested. Active bystander, it's an active it's an interactive session. You've probably kind of done these bystander trainings before, but it's just trying to say, how is it that I can actually support the person I know if they're going through a particularly difficult time? And we provide different scenarios in how you would particularly be an ally in dealing with Islamophobia. And so just quickly about what MEND does, we've got 4 key aspects to our work. One is, and this is our overriding objective, is to tackle Islamophobia and reduce Islamophobia, and everything we do falls into that pot. Our focus is to kind of empower our Muslim community, especially in media and politics, those arenas that really kind of create social change and influence people and society generally. Want to secure Muslim future for children in Britain, and that's a case of making sure that Muslims can be their full Muslim self wherever they are. You're at school, you're at work, you're at college, you're on the street. There's no shame in being Muslim. There's you can carry out your full Islamic duties and all those kind of things without any problems. So we work towards that. And the final thing is obviously a general appreciation of the contribution of Muslims and Islam to the UK, and that's where a lot of this education kind of comes about in the work that we do. And we end with Nelson Mandela's quote, which is really pointing about the whole issue of dealing with the other, that no one is born hating another person because of their skin, their background, their religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love, and love actually comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. And so we need to, I just want to say as we end, first, thank you, but you know what, there is a growing kind of trend or a messaging out there that this country is divided, that there's a massive division. But genuinely, in my exposure to kind of just different communities, it really isn't. What tends to be the case is that those who want to divide just seem a bit more active, yeah. And so we have to really kind of swamp them with more kind of efforts to unify, to stop this division, and to showcase the fact that, you know, as a community, we want to actually live side by side. We don't want to create these schisms and schisms. We want to live together. And this is a call for everyone, me, you, and everyone who hears this call to say, listen, we can't let those who want to divide us actually win out. But thank you once again. I really appreciate you guys for your engagement, for your interaction. Sorry if it's kind of like gone a bit long, but I'm really, really thankful for this opportunity. Thank you, Sarah, and everyone at the Muslim Lived Experience Network. And
thank you so much, Abdullah. I'm just putting the details in the chat for anyone who'd like to find out more about MEND and also the Muslim Lived Experience Network. I don't think we're going to have enough time for questions this time, but thank you so much, Abdullah, for your time and for delivering the session. Super informative and really great conversation. So thank you all for attending as well.